Jason is the National Wikimedian at the National Library of Wales. He works to advocate for open access within the culture sector by openly sharing library data and demonstrating the benefits of linked open data to the organisation and the public. He's also in my good books as co-editor of Callaghan Index because he recently wrote an excellent article for one of our issues. So I'm sure you've all read that. If you haven't, read it. If you have, read it again. So over to you then, Jason. Or rather, this is a video. So over to the video of Jason, and then Jason questions and answers.
Prynhawn da, good afternoon. Thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today about Wikidata. At the National Library of Wales, we have been experimenting with Wikidata more and more over the last few years as a way of improving access to our data, the quality of our data, and of developing new tools and services for our users. So my talk today will hopefully explain a bit more about what Wikidata is, how it can be utilised to unlock, enrich and explore our treasured data sets. So having started manually sharing data for a few individual items in our collection, there are now lots of items on Wikidata about our collections or in some way connected to our collections. This includes over 15,000 artworks from the collection, 30,000 books, entries for 5,000 people in the Dictionary of Welsh Biography, and lots of other smaller data sets. And as the volume of data has increased, so too has the connections between our collections and the collections of other institutions as well. And we are one of just over 3,500 institutions with catalogue data currently in Wikidata. So we're not alone in the way that we're working here. And many of those institutions, like us, also share their unique identifiers through Wikidata so they can be attached to appropriate items. And this is something I'll talk more about later. So before we delve any deeper, I want to pause and explain a little bit more about what exactly Wikidata is. And to do that, I have a flashy video that I made earlier.
Wikidata is part of the Wikimedia family, and it's a sister project of Wikipedia.
It's like Wikipedia, but for data, and it's fast becoming the world's largest and most popular source of open data about everything from people and places and things to art and literature. Wikidata is linked data. This means that every piece of data has a unique identifier, a Q number, and data is presented in a series of statements or triples.
For example, Jason works at the National Library of Wales.
And Aaron was born in Bangor. This makes data machine readable and human readable, and it also allows us to connect all the data together. For example, we both work as Wikimedians in residence, and our employers are both located in Wales.
Many of the things you see around us already have structured data on Wikidata, so it can all be linked together. And that means we can use it to answer complex questions about the world around us, such as,
give me a list of all castles in Wales. Or, show me all the poets who went to Bangor University. Where can I find information about Tom Jones?
Wikidata has a query service and other tools for asking these questions and visualizing all the data.
And every piece of data in Wikidata can be described in any one of the nearly 300 languages used on Wikipedia, so we can add Welsh language labels to all the data. So this massive open database can be used for research. It can also be used to share data in an open and reusable way, but it can also be used to power apps and websites. And like Wikipedia, you can add and edit Wikidata. You can even import or export entire datasets using Wikidata's suite of tools. So sharing your data to Wikidata clearly presents a lot of opportunities for better engagement with our data and improving the quality of our data. Now I'll be talking lots about the reasons why it is beneficial to share data with Wikidata, but before I get into that, I want to talk briefly about how we share data to Wikidata. So the first thing to be aware of is that Wikidata is licensed as CC0. So anyone sharing data with Wikidata needs to agree to that license and share their data openly in a way that it can be reused by anyone. So here's an example of a Wikidata item that's been annotated. So you can see that each item has a label, a human readable label, and a machine readable Q number. That's its unique identifier. And then you can add a description in numerous languages. You can add alias for different names. And then you describe the item with a series of triples or statements. So you can see Douglas Adams was educated at St. John's College. That's your first triple. You can then add qualifiers to triples to add end dates and start dates, for example, and you can also add references to each piece of data so that you can clearly show where that information has come from. In terms of the actual process of uploading and converting metadata to Wikidata, it's essentially a process of mapping. So you map metadata fields to Wikidata properties, and the values in those fields are then mapped to Wikidata items. So this is an example from our Welsh landscapes collection, which we converted into a format that you can see here that we could use to upload with a tool called Quick Statements that allows you to upload lots of items to Wikidata automatically in one go. So as you can see, you need to map fields such as creator and publisher to the relevant Wikidata properties. That's really quite a straightforward process, and there's documentation on the appropriate properties to use for certain types of items. The next column contains the actual values. So the creator is John Skinner Prout. So we need to find his Wikidata ID, if indeed he has one. And there are some good tools to help automate or semi-automate this process that can be a bit trickier. For example, Google Sheets and OpenRefine both have basic tools for querying the Wikidata API and reconciling your data. So in sharing our metadata with Wikidata, we've really focused on quality over quantity, extracting as much information as possible from our metadata, and we found that that had a much bigger impact as time went on. So it wasn't very long after starting to convert metadata for these Welsh landscape artworks to Wikidata that we realised the potential here. Not only was this a fantastic way of giving better access to our data, but we were able to enrich our data. So for example, in the metadata, where we just had the name of an illustrator or a lithographer or a printer or the publisher of a work, with Wikidata we have access to all the data about those things. So we have biographical data about the publishers, about the creators, about the artists. We have location data about where people were based, what's depicted in the image. So for example, by converting strings of text in the metadata for place names to Wikidata items, we were able to access all the Wikidata about those places, such as coordinates. So we were able to visualize the collections on a map for the first time. So anyone who's worked with metadata will know that there are real challenges around the way that things are described in different records and having some kind of consistency. So authors' names perhaps are spelt differently on different records. Publishers' names are described differently or even given in different languages on different catalogue records. And this creates a real challenge in terms of being able to have good queryable, consistent, structured data. However, if you want to describe a book, for example, on Wikidata, and you want to put a statement saying who the publisher is, you have to connect to the Wikidata item about that publisher or about that author. And that means that you overcome this problem because you are forced to confront it and deal with it and reconcile those inconsistencies in your data. And this creates richer metadata. To further highlight how data can be enriched by Wikidata, and to start to demonstrate some of the research potential of creating this linked data, I'm going to use an example of our Penniarth manuscript collection, which we recently converted to Wikidata. So this is how the Penniarth metadata looked on our catalogue. It's essentially a series of fields with text descriptions. Now some of these, such as the size, the language and the date of a work, are really easy to convert and add to Wikidata. But some of the really valuable information in the data for these manuscripts is in the scope and content field, where it tells you who the contributors are, who the scribes might be, what kind of content is in the manuscripts. But as a text description, that information is not that useful. It's not structured data, it's not in any kind of format that we can analyze it and drill down into it in any detail. So using semi-automated techniques, identifying patterns in the text, for example, we were able to extract some of that information, such as the genre, the authors, the scribes associated with each manuscript. And this is the kind of task that artificial intelligence could potentially do in the near future as well. So once we had extracted this extra information and mapped all the metadata to Wikidata, matching with items already on Wikidata wherever possible, this is the kind of data that we have now for each manuscript. And remember, if Wikidata has a statement saying that the main subject of a manuscript is Magnus Maximus, you instantly have access to all the data Wikidata holds about Magnus Maximus, including his dates, his positions that he held, his ancestry, etc. And this means we have greatly expanded the amount of information we have and know about each of these manuscripts. So then, using the Wikidata query service, we can start to drill down and analyze this new data in order to better understand the makeup of the collection and the individual manuscripts. So starting at a very simple level, here we have a breakdown of the languages used in the manuscript collection. So you can see a good chunk of the manuscripts are in English and Welsh or Latin, but there's lots of other languages that make up the collection as well. Now theoretically you don't need linked data to create this kind of visualization. There's nothing linked about knowing a breakdown of the languages in the works. However, our catalogue, and most library catalogues, don't give users the kind of facility that they can ask these kind of questions and filter content in this way. So sharing the data on Wikidata allows our users to do these extra kind of queries that you couldn't do on our own catalogue. Here's another similar example, again produced through a Wikidata query. And this looks at the physical size of all the manuscripts throughout time. And you can see there's some clear trends there in terms of the physical size of manuscripts at different points in history. Clearly you can see they get larger over time, but there are also some interesting plateaus where manuscripts were fairly uniform in size at different points in history. And this is the kind of research that you simply can't do in a traditional library catalogue. Then if we start to explore the extra functionality that having linked data gives us for this collection, we can do things like organize all the works by genre and main subject. So for example, we can group all the examples of dictionaries together, or we could explore and filter dictionaries by language, so we could request just to view the Welsh language dictionaries, for example. We could look at all the genealogies contained in the manuscripts, and we can even filter them by the families that they document. Now obviously what you see here on the screen is just a visualization of data organized in this way, but it would be very easy to build an interface whereby users could actually filter content in this way, and that's the real power of Wikidata. Linked data also allows us to start exploring the connections between manuscripts. So with this visualization, we've been able to identify the connections between scribes of different manuscripts. We're also able to start exploring the connections between different collections that we've shared on Wikidata. So here you see the Penyath manuscripts in white, and in blue you see scribes of those manuscripts that also have Dictionary of Welsh Biography entries. And remember, we've also shared Dictionary of Welsh Biography data on Wikidata. And Wikidata also highlights where other institutions hold different versions of the same manuscript, manuscripts that contain the same text or have the same scribes. So you can start to build up a network of collections across different institutions all over the world. And this brings me on to the use of identifiers on Wikidata. Now, in addition to standard Wikidata properties that are used to describe the item, there are identifier properties, and any institution can make a request to create an identifier property for their collections so that they can share their unique identifiers for something that's on Wikidata. So with this example here of the item for David Lloyd George, the former Welsh Prime Minister of the United Kingdom, there are dozens of identifiers for various national libraries, for data aggregators such as VAF and ISNI, art galleries, genealogical databases, a whole raft of different organisations. So Wikidata really starts to act as a central hub connecting all of the world's collections and giving users access to information held at a whole range of institutions for the things that they're interested in. So for people in the Dictionary of Welsh Biography, for example, we can see that over 1,000 people also have Oxford Dictionary of National Biography entries. Over 400 have archive collections at the National Library. 343 have portraits in the National Portrait Gallery. We can see if someone has a blue commemorative plaque, all because these organisations have added their identifiers to the items on Wikidata. This gives users a pathway to all these different resources from one central location, and Wikidata gives you a clickable URL for each of these resources. So if someone wants to see portraits in the National Portrait Gallery for someone who has a blue plaque or has a Dictionary of Welsh Biography entry, then they can do that all from one place. So we've looked at how Wikidata can enrich and improve metadata. We've looked at how it gives better access, how it can help with research and create a much richer data set for people to explore. So for the last part of my talk, I want to look at how we can round trip this data. What can we actually do as organisations with the data that we've shared to Wikidata? So at the very simplest level, we can use those Wikidata identifiers to give our users access to additional resources. So here on our Dictionary of Welsh Biography website, we give people access to the Wikidata items, to the Wikipedia articles, and to external IDs such as VAF. Now, a few years back, we shared data on all the public libraries in Wales to Wikidata. And the Welsh Library's website now utilises this data by embedding a map that allows users to explore all those libraries and link to their official websites using the data that's in Wikidata. So this is a real practical application and one that's really low cost and low maintenance of Wikidata on a website. And for the Dictionary of Welsh Biography website, we've recently developed an interactive timeline that's powered entirely by the Wikidata that we've created for each individual in the Dictionary of Welsh Biography. And this uses openly licensed images from Wikimedia Commons. It gives users access not only to the Dictionary of Welsh Biography article, but the Wikipedia article. And it allows you to filter and explore the content using an almost endless combination of filters. So this really gives extra functionality to the website and allows you to explore the content in ways that you simply couldn't before. And for all the artworks and digitized content that we've been sharing to Wikimedia Commons and Wikidata, We worked with a volunteer to adapt some open source software completely for free in order to create this linked data interface to explore 18,000 digital images from our collection. And this gives users a raft of functionality that they simply didn't have before when exploring our collection, such as exploring by collection, by genre, by the things that are depicted within the images. You can filter content by author, by the types of material used to create the items, and all these images also link back to the image in our library catalogue. You can explore the collection on a map, as we talked about earlier, so you can filter by place, or you can manually zoom around and find images on a map based on the places that are depicted with the images. So having created this structured, enriched, linked open data has enabled us to offer our users functionality that we simply couldn't offer before. So to briefly summarize, and putting Wikidata itself aside for a second, linked open data in general offers massive potential for enriching, exploring, and connecting our data. And Wikidata is currently the biggest and most well-supported open data repository. It's got nearly 90 million data items, and it's growing fast. And nearly half of those items in Wikidata are books and journal articles in particular. And it has a raft of free tools that are well supported. It has a query service. There's lots of tools for visualizing the data. And it's rapidly becoming a central hub that's joining all the world's collections together in one central place. And this makes it perfect for research, for data enrichment, and as a basis for new and improved ways of searching our collections.
Brilliant. Thank you, Jason. Interesting as always. Also, appreciated the reference to Magnus Maximus. I mean, what an excellent name. That guy, you kind of committed to trying to become Roman emperor with a name like that, aren't you? That's some serious nominative determinism. Metadata. We've got a couple of questions for you. If I can just find them. So Ahava asks, has the National Library been able to round trip the whole process to be able to get that data back out of Wiki projects and into the library's catalogue records?
Okay, so as you saw in the talk, we've been pulling data back out of Wikidata to create things like the timeline and to add additional resource links to the Dictionary of Welsh Biography website. We haven't yet gone through the process of bringing data background and into our catalogue. And that's not so much a technical issue, but rather a discussion that we're still having at the library as to how that works in terms of bringing data in that's from a third-party source, the quality of which can't necessarily be verified. So there's some discussion to be had around how we bring that data back into metadata and how that looks, and how we make it clear to our users that that's additional third-party data rather than authoritative metadata that's been input by our catalogers.
Yeah, that sounds very sensible. Yeah. Martin asks, do you have to provide data to a certain level of quality in order to contribute, or could you just essentially match up fields and send it off?
Yep, there's really no kind of limitations. You can, a lot of people, for example, will share data for artworks without actually sharing a digital image of the artwork, without giving information about what's depicted in the artworks. And there's no problem with that. It's valuable data to be shared and added to this sort of network of data. But if you are expecting to be able to do really nice things with that data and use it to improve interfaces and do search and interesting queries, the richer the data that you share, the better the information that you're going to get back out of Wikidata, basically.
Yeah, thank you. He also asks, you talk about matching up data from uncontrolled fields like summaries, but he wasn't sure you're generating automatic data connections or manually linking data from that data.
Okay. Well, I can yeah, explain a little bit about that. So yeah, I mean that data that comes from our archive catalog. So it's not sort of Marc data. It's kind of from our archive catalog. I think it's based on Dublin Core. But basically, yeah, we've got these kind of text descriptions, the summary fields, and there's a lot of really valuable information in there. And so really what I did was an experiment to see what we could do by extracting that data and matching it up, making it more structured basically, rather than just being a human readable sentence, making it machine readable and making it queryable, and just sort of seeing what added value that gave us.
Oh yeah, Martin clarifies, says you're answering it. Yeah, I think you've answered to his satisfaction.
Fantastic.
Anastasia asks, could you tell us more about journal articles? Do you have a theory as to why this is a growing area?
Yes, so this is something that has grown out of an initiative on Wiki called WikiCite. And one of the aims of this project is really to develop structured data for citations that can then be used on Wikipedia. And it improves the quality of citations on Wikipedia. It makes it easier for people to discover relevant resources in order to research and cite on Wikipedia. So there are a number of editors who are kind of rapidly putting in journal articles, you know, academic articles into Wikidata in a bid to basically improve the quality of citations on Wikipedia.
Yeah, that sounds like a very positive initiative, really. I think. Yeah, that could only be good. Vaso is wondering about the resolution of images uploaded to Wikidata.
Okay, so yeah, the images actually get uploaded to Wikimedia Commons, which is another sister project of Wikipedia, and from there they're linked to Wikidata. So the images themselves don't sit within the Wikidata data set. There are no firm sort of policies around what kind of image quality you have to use to upload. At the National Library of Wales, we follow the Europeana guidelines, which say images should be at least 1200 pixels. Obviously, the higher quality the pictures you share, the more useful they're going to be. We've found that when we've shared very high resolution content, it gets picked up and reused a lot more in Wikipedia articles and outside of Wikipedia projects as well. But it's perfectly reasonable just to share screen resolution or lower quality images to Wikipedia, so that you retain the ability to generate income, for example.
Yeah, I was just wondering that. Yes, I mean, because presumably you'd be sharing all of this as CC0, would you, or CC BY? Do you have certain control?
Most of the images that we've shared to Wiki are digital reproductions of works that are already in the public domain. So our policy is not then to claim any rights to the digital reproduction. They are also in the public domain, essentially. So we use CC0 or a public domain tag for a lot of our digital content.
Thomas asks if you've got a walkthrough or list of tools you'd use to get data into Wikidata, or anything you'd recommend to get started. It seems again almost like Sparkle is useful again. Is it potentially?
Yeah. I'm no coder, but I've had to learn how to do Sparkle. It's kind of essential when you're working with Wikidata, and it's fairly straightforward, really. There is a whole section on Wikidata if you go to the kind of help pages on community uploads, and there's a whole bunch of guides there, step by step, the different tools that are available, and there's a lot of community support as well. There are places where you can ask for assistance, and other Wikipedia editors will come and give you a hand, or alternatively you can contact someone like me directly, and I can point you in the right direction and give you some help.
Thank you. We've got a message from Jane rather than a question, just a heads up for attendees that MDG are discussing the development of online asynchronous Wikidata training with Wikimedia UK. Yay. So that's excellent. Thank you again. Excellent.
You're welcome.
So I think it's break time again. We will